it's that quote, the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. So at a certain point, we have to look at what we're doing and be like, is this actually working? If I just keep restricting, am I going to see anything change? If I keep doing the same exercise things, the same mindset, it's really the mindset, the approach that we have when it comes to how we eat and how we exercise. If you're not seeing the result you want, you got to change something.
Today's episode is with Dr. Elly Michelle. Dr. Elly is a licensed naturopathic doctor who specializes in individualized women's medicine, specifically in regards to optimizing hormones, digestion, and overall energy. Dr. Elly is passionate about restoring balance in the body naturally and sustainably through lifestyle medicine, nutrition, and strategic supplementation by uncovering the root cause of health concerns and understanding what is going on in your body at a deeper level. In today's episode, Dr. Elly and I chat about several different topics within women's health, specifically related to hormonal dysregulation and different ways to test and address certain dysfunctions. We talk about cycle mapping, as well as how to better understand how birth control works. We chat about Dr. Elly's experience with women who are chronically restricting calories and carbs and how she works through that in her own practice, and tons more related topics. This episode is jam-packed with information that all women should know and understand. So let's jump right into it with Dr. Elly Michelle. All right, welcome back to MetFlex and Chill. I am here with Dr. Elly Michelle. What's up, Dr. Elly? How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited you're here. I'm excited to chat about all things women's health. We're going to dive into some hormonal stuff. We're going to dive into some common issues or things that you see within your practice, what I see within my practice, and kind of hopefully answer some questions that many of our clients tend to have. Before we get started, do you want to give our viewers and listeners a little background on who you are, what you do, how you got into the nutrition and fitness industry?
Yeah, well, so I am a naturopathic doctor. For anyone listening who doesn't know what that is, we are licensed medical doctors in not every state, but in many states. I'm licensed in California. And so we could go through 4 years of medical school, basic sciences, anatomy, physiology, and we learn a lot about botanicals, herbs, nutrition, lifestyle, and micronutrient supplementation as our primary tools in helping people. So it's not about a quick fix, just masking symptoms with pharmaceuticals. Our focus is much more getting to the root cause, identifying the underlying imbalances in the body to help people get long-term, have long-term health instead of just masking the symptom. So, and I specialize in women's health, and I see a lot of women with hormonal concerns, which there's so many different ways that can manifest. But so I do a lot with hormones, metabolism, libido, sexuality concerns, anxiety, mental health. I do have sort of a niche in women who struggle with restrictive eating or disordered eating. And that was really how I got into this path, was my own history with an eating disorder in my teenage years. When I was 14, I struggled with anorexia, and that pretty much went through high school. And then once I had stabilized and I did really start to heal from that. But for much of my 20s, I was still quite thin and I was not at appropriate body weight for my unique body. So that was what sparked my passion for alternative approaches to healing, because when I was really ill, I was going to see conventionally trained doctors who just wanted to put me on the birth control pill because I wasn't having my period, and antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications. And I knew at the time, like even I was 14 or 15, and I was just like, what's that going to do? How is that going to help me? Why is no one actually really helping me with why I'm dealing with my stress and dealing with life this way? So I just it's kind of part of me that I've always wanted to dig deep and look for the real answers instead of just taking the easy way out, the quick fix that doesn't really solve anything. So it's part of who I am, I think. And it led me on this path where I'm just constantly wanting to understand the body better. I am so, I'm like in love with the mind body connection and how intimately connected they are. Whatever's happening in here influences the physical body and vice versa. So
Mhm.
yeah, now I just feel like I'm rambling, but that
No,
gives you a
no.
little bit of an idea
Awesome.
about me. And I did get into, I'll answer your question really quick about fitness. I got introduced to strength training in my first year of medical school. Um, when I was still, on my healing journey. I was beyond my full blown eating disorder, but still had a lot of like patterns and underlying, issues. I was still quite fearful about getting to an appropriate body weight for me. I still wasn't having my period, even though I was eating. And I still had sort of an unhealthy relationship with exercise. But I was really interested in how can I become healthier and how can I heal my hormones. I knew it was not okay that I wasn't having my period. I knew I
Mhm.
needed to gain mass, like body mass. But I wanted it to be healthy, right? As most people do who need to put on weight. And
Mhm.
so um, I was also quite worried about my bone health, which at the time I'd already had one or two DEXA scans showing that I had, that I was in the early phase of osteoporosis, which is called osteopenia. It's like you have lower bone mineral density. So that was quite
Mhm.
concerning to me too, because I was thinking, gosh, I don't want to have full on osteoporosis when I'm 40 and just maybe trip and break a hip or
Yeah.
something. Like that would be horrible. So I was very worried about that. And I thought I really need to turn things around. I need to get healthier. So I found a mentor who I was in school with, who had a history of being a trainer, a very high level trainer. She had a lot of education around that before she went back to medical school to become a naturopathic doctor. And so I sought her out and I said, I want to gain some muscle. Like, what do I need to do? Tell me what to do. And she was like, you want to put on muscle? I was a total like skinny yogi vegetarian at the time.
Okay.
And I was like, yep, I want to do it. Just tell me what to do. And so she was like, okay. So she started training me from scratch. Like, I wasn't even lifting weights. She was really, really big on creating a foundation. Again, that's really like that's our philosophy, is to build a solid foundation. So I was just doing like body weight corrective exercise, lots of myofascial release and building strength in the weak areas, and calming down the hypertonicity in other areas. So she really prepared me to be able to add load. And that, I progressed. I got stronger. I started eating meat again. And so then I got to the point where we just became friends and we started working out together. And I became so passionate about it. My health really started to improve from that point. And I've just never looked back. It really made a huge difference for me. It made me so much healthier. I'm much,
Mhm.
much better off with a focus on, with strength training really being my primary form of exercise. And I don't even think about cardio.
No, that's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm the same way. I've seen your like posts on Instagram, like your workouts and stuff, and they're awesome.
Oh, thank
So
you.
that kind of leads us into the first thing I was mentioning about, we have the different clients that we work with. I feel like we definitely have similarities, especially I know with women who coming to me, looking to change their body composition
Hmm.
and maybe lose some body fat and get healthier, but also change their body composition, right? For me at least, I see a lot of, restriction, right? With lower calories
Yeah.
and just chronically under eating. And like kind of just stuck in this, like not knowing where to go from there. Specifically
Hmm.
with me too, it's a lot of the, women coming from the low carb keto space as
Hmm.
well. So do you have any like experience on your end with women coming to you who are chronically restricting and
Oh, yeah.
kind of in that mindset? How do you help them in that regard?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing that is really important for women who are dealing with that to acknowledge is it's that quote, the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. So at a certain
Mhm.
point, we have to look at what we're doing and be like, is this actually working? If I just keep restricting, am I going to see anything change? If I keep doing the same exercise things, the same mindset, it's really the mindset, the
Mhm.
approach that we have when it comes to how we eat and how we exercise, if you're not seeing the result you want, you got to change something. So that's really, I think, the first thing. And then I think another really important thing to think about with that is taking the emphasis off of the weight and onto other markers of health. So like your mood, your sleep, your energy, your sex drive, your bowel movements, and overall digestion. So these are other body temperature. That's another really important one. Whether or not you feel like your hair and your skin, because that's something a lot of women are concerned with, hair loss or dry skin, acne, that kind of thing. Like those are all things to look at that are other signs of health. So rather than fixating on like a number or just obsessing about wanting to lose body fat, I think looking at these other signs of health and focusing on those and tracking those as we, make behavior changes is also really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree about the tracking side of things. Having data and, really understanding that like what's that saying? Like what's measured gets managed and what doesn't gets thrown out or whatever. I don't even know if that's the correct saying, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like super important to actually have like some data in that sense. So I do that with all my clients as well. I had a question about, so in terms of nutrition, I would say, like, what do you see, like, what's a common kind of nutrition hiccup, I guess you could say, that you see with many of your women clients, like, rather than just, the under eating side of things? Is it like under eating protein, carbs? Like, is there anything specific there, or is it all just kind of individual?
Definitely, I think the most common one is protein. So many women are not eating enough protein. And I'm not perfect at it, like it's hard to eat enough protein for maybe not for everyone, but for a lot of people, it's like you really have to put effort in to get the ideal amount of protein if you're really trying to optimize protein intake. So that's the one that I think across the board, I'm always having to work on that with people.
Yeah.
And it makes a huge difference. Like when people actually get it, they always notice a difference. Like they just feel more satiated throughout the day. They're not thinking about food as much. They're not craving things as much. And, for the most part, they do start to see changes, physical changes as well, when they really are doing it consistently, not just like every once in a while they do it. It's like you're really making it like a day-to-day thing. So that's a big one. And then I would say probably second to that is carbohydrates. For a lot of women, that is true, especially when they are coming from a restrictive background.
Under eating carbs.
Yeah, under eating carbs. Yeah.
And how do you approach that in terms of trying to get them to eat more carbs? Because I know that I have that challenge a lot with my clients.
Yeah. I think that, depending on what their goals are. So a lot of women do want to see body composition changes. They're not feeling confident. They're just not feeling great in their bodies. And so especially if they've already incorporated strength training and they are actually working out in the gym on a regular basis, I will explain to them, if you, first of all, number one, if you're not getting enough energy in, you're kind of like whatever you're doing in the gym is sort of just like counteracting. Like you're not going to get results because you can't build. If you aren't putting enough building blocks in, what are you going to build muscle from?
Exactly. It doesn't just poof out of nowhere.
Exactly. It's like, whoo, just magically appears.
I wish.
I know, that would be great. It'd be so nice if that were the case, but no, it doesn't work like that. We have to build muscle. I mean, the way to see body composition changes is to build muscle. And if we are still stuck in that under eating cycle, it just doesn't happen. And so number one is the protein, but if you're doing that and you're still not seeing changes, you probably do need to add some carbohydrates because you're still burning a lot of energy when you're in the gym, and your body is going to pull from its own stores. It's going to start breaking itself down, its own tissues. It's going to break down muscle tissue for energy. It's going to break down your thymus, which is an immune gland. So there's other areas that it's going to pull from if the energy is not available. So when I kind of explain that to them, they usually do start to understand. And I also explain it sometimes as, think of it like your finances. If you are just living off of credit cards, like you're spending money that you don't have and you're just digging yourself deeper into a hole. It's the same thing with your energy intake. If you're going and exercising a ton and you're spending energy that you don't actually have, you're digging yourself into a hole. It's going to be a lot harder to see results when you're in that place. And you're probably going to go the opposite direction that you really want because you're stressing your body out so much. And the body does things we don't want it to do when it's in a state of chronic stress.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
that usually like lands with people, and they do start to see what I'm talking about. So especially if they're working out like in the morning, fasted, they haven't had anything. And I'm like, well, you're already in an energy deficit when you wake up. If you want to build muscle, you're going and
yeah. No, I know what you're saying. Do you see, so like, with that, do you like, when we're kind of getting on the topic of hormones and like how, we talked about stress and maybe some chronic cortisol issues, low thyroid, do those kind of come up, they probably manifest with, the over restriction, over exercising, like those two kind of together.
Definitely.
Is there a way that you maybe, cause I get this question all the time, like, how do I test my hormones, or how do I know like if they're, quote unquote out of whack? So can we chat a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for women, if they've been doing the lots of exercise, specifically lots of cardio, and they've been restricting food for, a extended period of time, one of the best markers of their health is going to be their cycle, their menstrual cycle. So number one, are you having a regular period or not? So that's one easy thing just to look for when it comes to hormonal health. You can kind of assess like, okay, how are my hormones doing? Am I having a period every month, or maybe I skip it from time to time? That's a red flag. Or if it's just completely non-existent, that's a big red flag.
Yeah.
And so in terms of testing, for a woman, if she is having a regular period, if she's having a regular cycle, then what I like to use is the Dutch test for that, because it has a certain test called the cycle map, which actually you take a urine sample for almost an entire cycle. So you can actually see your unique fluctuation of estrogen and progesterone, which are the primary female sex hormones. You can actually see what your unique pattern is, because we don't all look the same. Like we all have different cycle lengths. Our hormones get, when they're going up and down, it's different for every woman. So that is really a useful way. And I like that more than doing a blood test, because a blood test is just a single day. And for women, our hormones are different every day. So if I just get a woman's hormone levels on one day, and this is where I think a lot of conventionally trained doctors they're like, yeah, sure, let's check your hormones. It's like one day. Well, that doesn't really tell me much. If you were on day one, or if you were on your period, your estrogen's going to be lower, because that's the point when estrogen's usually lowest for a woman. So, or if she's, mid-cycle around ovulation, her estrogen will be much higher. So there's just, it's going to be different every day. So I prefer to do the cycle map for a cycling woman. If she's not having a regular cycle, or if her period's not coming, I pretty much know her hormones are going to be low. At that point, and every woman has a different, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of like a threshold for how much she can tolerate before her reproductive system will kind of be like, we're done, no more stress. And so some women can still have a period when they're training they're really training a lot, they're going through a lot of stress, but some women are much more sensitive, and their period will go away. So if that's happened, I already know that her sex hormones are going to be low.
And okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So usually I personally don't really even bother running sex hormones if there's no period, because I already know that they're, going to be low if she has that specific history and her period has gone away. So it's not always the case, but that's very clear to me that her hormones will be low because she's just not cycling.
Yeah. And then it's probably like, where would you go from there in terms of like, you probably already have an idea of like her lifestyle, if that's the case, right? And so you start to address like, stress, sleep, exercise. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything you start with, or is it just kind of overall haul of like, okay, let's see what you're doing?
Yeah. One of the first things in that scenario is really to work on making sure that they're nourishing. more. And not everyone's going to want to go like from, 0 to 100. They're not going to just make a huge jump. We slowly start increasing in a way that they're comfortable. So that's one of the things that I do, is really kind of meet them where they're at and work, like support them in a way that works for them.
Yeah.
So we work on adding things, we work on if they've been skipping breakfast or eating a very, very minimal breakfast, we work on really working on that first. Let's make that more of a complete meal. Or if they've been really restricting carbs, but they're okay with protein and fat, okay, let's really focus on that. Go ahead.
Do you, I was just going to ask, cause I know like you brought this up in the beginning, and I had this too when I was a teenager, just, going to the doctor, getting one blood test and like, oh, hey, like your cycle's off, let's put you on birth control and see what happens. Like, is there anything that you like, do you ever, because it's something that's happened with my clients too, like some of their doctors will kind of force the cycle, right? By giving them, external hormones like progesterone or whatever it may be. Is that something that you incorporate depending on like what else is going on, or is it all just like,
Never.
Okay.
Never. And I will say, so a lot of people think about birth control in that way. Like they think it's like forcing a cycle, like you said, but it actually isn't. So what the birth control pill is doing is it's actually suppressing your own hormonal production. It turns the brain and ovary communication off. So if you look at a naturally cycling woman's hormones throughout the month, like they're like her estrogen goes up and then it kind of goes down and then it goes up a little bit again. And then her progesterone is going to be pretty flatline for the first half of the cycle. And then it goes up significantly in the second half. That's how it should be. If you look at someone's hormones on birth control, it's just like at the bottom, like they're just flatlined. So basically the body thinks that you're in menopause. That's like your hormones look like you're a menopausal woman, basically. So it's just shutting everything off. And so when you're having what a lot of women think is a period when they're on birth control, it's not a period at all, because the thing that causes a period is the hormonal fluctuations. But on birth control pills, you're not having those hormonal fluctuations. What it is it's a withdrawal, because when you're taking those synthetic hormones, it's a pharmaceutical. Birth control pills are a pharmaceutical. So you're taking a synthetic pharmaceutical substance that mimics estrogen. So the brain thinks it just shuts off, because it's a whole feedback thing, but the brain and the hormones. So basically, just lost my train of thought.
No, you're good. You're good.
Where was I going with that?
That it forces your brain to think that you're like menstruating, but you're actually not.
Yes. With the withdrawal bleed. Okay. So you're taking the synthetic substance all throughout the month, and then that last week of the pack for most of birth controls, it's a placebo. So you're not actually getting the substance in that week. So then your body has like kind of a withdrawal from that synthetic estrogen-like substance.
Got it.
So it's not actually a period at all.
It's like so crazy. Like I know this just from like, doing my own research and stuff, but it's just still so crazy to hear, because, so many women probably listening to this are either on birth control or they were put on birth control when they were younger.
Yeah. And they don't understand at all. Like, I mean, I have women that I work with where they're on birth control and they're like, oh yeah, when I'm on my period, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, that's not a period. You're not getting a period.
Yeah. So what would you say, like, to a woman who is listening to this and like, I'm on birth control and like, I want to continue to be on birth control or be like use some form of birth control. How do I transition off, or like, what are the other options? Or like, what do you recommend in that sense?
Yeah. My recommendation for all women is to learn your own rhythm and your own cycle. It's so empowering when you understand your body and you understand when you're fertile and when you're not, because a lot of us were taught we can get pregnant literally at any point, and that's not how the woman's body works. We have times when we're fertile and times when we're not, and that's the whole point of the menstrual cycle. So to actually understand what's happening for your body is my number one recommendation. And then, depending on if she wants to get pregnant or if she doesn't want to get pregnant, once you learn your body's cycle, then you can make choices depending on what your goals are. So if you're trying to avoid pregnancy and you don't want to use any kind of hormonal interventions, you learn your own cycle. So, usually it takes some time to do that. So you probably want to use some kind of backup method of birth control, like condoms or that kind of thing, while you're kind of in the learning phase. But then after you feel more confident, then you can you just use that information to decide, when you're going to have intercourse or not, when are you going to use protection or not, that kind of thing. And I was just going to add, there's one non-hormonal tool for this that I recommend all the time. It's called the Daysy fertility tracker. It's spelled Daysy, and it's a basal body thermometer, but it has this whole algorithm built into it. So it syncs up basically with your body, like it learns your cycle for you. But it fosters your own ability to learn at the same time, which is, I don't like when a lot of women just rely on apps, but you're actually taking your temperature and then you get to start learning, okay, you're seeing your temperature, and the temperature is associated with where you are in your cycle, because after ovulation has occurred, your temperature should rise. So when you start seeing that pattern, you can say, oh, that's when I ovulate. So I know that's my fertile day. And then your fertile window is going to be 3 to 5 days before and after that happened, because sperm can survive inside of the body. So anyways, so the Daysy, I highly recommend for women who don't rely on hormonal contraceptives.
Yeah, that's definitely for sure a popular one. My question was, and sorry, I was interrupting you. I'm just getting excited because I have all these questions.
No, interrupt me. It's all good.
So for a non-cycling woman, so a woman who doesn't have their cycle, how would they use the Daysy, or is it possible? Because that's a question that a lot of people have. There's okay, well, am I fertile? Am I not? I'm not cycling. So is that just
that's a tough one. It really, it's best to use something like that when you are having a cycle. It's tough. I mean, when you're not having a cycle, you're missing that feedback from your body.
Yeah.
So I think, work on getting your cycle back.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
That's the best thing.
And on the subject of cycling and all of that, I know that we were talking about this off air, you deal with some women who have issues with low libido and, things like that. So can you maybe chat a little bit about that and kind of how you address that?
Yeah. So, for women, libido is very complex. There's so many different factors that play into whether or not we have any sexual desire or not. And the number one sexual organ is your brain. That is the primary sexual organ. It all starts in the brain. So I'm a huge proponent of women cultivating a relationship with themselves first before they start being like, why am I not having any desire, to engage in sexual activities with a partner? Focus on yourself, focus on your relationship with yourself, with your body, your health. How do you speak to yourself? Can you be loving with yourself, or are you constantly beating yourself up and putting yourself down? It's really important that we have that intimacy with ourselves before we go and engage in intimacy with a partner. So I think that's, because I'm always going to start with foundation before I start making things all medical. So I think, and that's key. I think that's really missing. And it's not our fault. A lot of us aren't taught how to have that kind of relationship with ourselves or with our bodies. Yeah. But I think that it's really important for women, because for us, libido is we have to feel sexy to have a libido.
Yeah.
And if we don't feel comfortable in our body, we're not going to feel that sexy. Yeah. So it's really about feeling really connected to our body and to ourselves. And then we bring that in, when you show up like that with a partner, it's, usually going to be good. So that's key. And then I think stress is just a huge part of it overall for women, because if we're stressed out about something, if it's work or, some other kind of relationship in our life, or we're just really unhappy with certain things that are happening, that's all a stress to the body. So it's gonna, we're gonna feel more anxious, or we're just distracted. It takes us out of the ability to be present. And for sex, you have to be able to be really present in the moment. That's,
Yeah.
that's what it is about. And so anything that's going to take us away from that is going to decrease libido. So
Mhm.
for women, I think being mindful of our stressors is huge. And then of course, the way that we're fueling is going to play into that too. If we're not eating enough, that, reproduction is sort of like the body's like, we don't care about that right now. We're just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And so if your body's just trying to survive, if it's in survival mode, the last thing it's thinking about is sex. So your
Yeah.
libido that's a very common thing that happens when women have been dieting for a long period of time, or they're in an energy deficit. They're just naturally not going to think about it very much.
Mhm. Yeah, no,
So,
and it makes total sense.
mhm. Yeah. Or if you're
You
driving yourself into the ground, doing tons and tons of exercise, your body is stressed. It's not going to want to extend energy. Sex is, again, it's an energy expenditure. It's
Yeah.
not going to want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and that's one thing too. It's like at least I was always told, exercise is a good stress. It's a good stress on your body. And it's
Hmm.
like, well, we only have like one stress. I call it stress bucket, right? Like everything
Yeah,
goes to the same stress. Like it's not like exercise is one thing, nutrition is one
exactly.
thing. Like they're all related. And so I think once you kind of like, if at least for me and for a lot of my clients, once we kind of like make that switch in our head, we're like, oh,
Hmm.
okay, this makes sense. Like the 6 times per week training and eating like nothing at all, it's just like that in itself is just like
Hmm.
red flags. Your body is just in survival mode, so nothing else is going to be priority.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
absolutely. And then just one other thought on that is, I think that because we are talking about sex, one thing that I find to be helpful for a lot of women is to sort of reframe the way that they think about sex, as instead of it's like, oh, something that like I have to do to please the partner, or like, oh, I feel
mhm.
guilty because we haven't been doing, we haven't been having as much sex. And so I feel kind of like, but think about it as something for you, because for women, sex and orgasm is a way that it decreases our stress hormones. So it is actually therapeutic for us. If you're
Mhm.
actually able to really go in and enjoy it, it's really helpful it's a helpful tool for dealing with stress. So when we think about it like, oh, this isn't like we get stressed out thinking like I have to do this, instead of thinking, oh, this is actually something I can do to take care of myself. This is actually a way that
Yeah.
I can help myself cope with the stress in my life.
Yeah, for sure. And I was actually just going to ask you too, like, do you have any like stress management tips or techniques?
Mm,
So besides,
yeah.
enjoying sex, that would be one of them. Do you have any other like things that you do personally or that you recommend in terms of like
Hmm.
stress management?
Yeah. There's so many wonderful tools for stress management. I think sleep is one of the most underrated tools for stress management. If you're
Same.
getting good like 8 to 10 hours, sometimes depending on, how busy or how much you've been working, I think a good solid 8 or 9 or even 10 hours of sleep is so therapeutic. And it does
Mhm.
really help us with stress. So that's a huge one. Eating, making sure that you're fueling yourself, keeping your blood sugar balanced. That's really important. Again, very underrated. Stress is a way
Mhm.
that or food is a way that we can help our bodies better cope with stress. It's like a buffer, especially
Mhm.
if you're exercising a lot. Because we are more sensitive just biologically, because we're built for conception and pregnancy. So our body is much
Yeah.
more sensitive to energy availability, and that's going to affect our hormones. So that is one really great way to help with stress. I think getting outside, being in nature, it's been
Mhm.
shown, there's medical literature on this. It's been shown to decrease stress and stress hormones.
Mhm.
Um, Connections, like having like social connections, also really, really healing, for everyone, but women are really biologically wired for connection and relationship. So,
Yeah.
both really having close connections with women, particularly, I think is really important for women.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Like I
For
get
sure.
like
I love that.
time with girlfriends. It's really great for
Yeah.
us to decrease stress.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Do you, and this is just because I always get this question a lot, especially when we're dealing with like sleep issues and things like that. And
Hmm.
Are there any, like supplements or like herbs or anything that you
Oh
recommend or
yeah,
use for yourself or your clients?
definitely. Yeah, yeah, both for myself and for the women I work with. I think that herbs can be really helpful. Again, I don't like to, a lot of people, like a lot of doctors on podcasts and stuff will always kind of talk about nutrients and supplements and things like that. And I think that they're very useful tools, but I really like to focus on foundations always. That's where I always go, because I
Mhm.
think people just forget how important and how powerful that is.
Yes.
And
We
and
always
then,
want like the quick
yeah,
fix or like the shiny object, and it's like,
uh-huh,
no, like you need to
yeah,
the non-shiny objects are where all the power is. So, sorry. I'm on the
exactly.
same page as you, so I'm just like
Exactly. Yeah, it's like we all want to just think, oh, like I'll just take the supplement and everything's going to be better.
yeah.
It's like I'll just take the supplement and my stress will disappear. No, your stress is still going to be there.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
but that being said, they can still help. So, I do incorporate a lot of what's called adrenal support. So your adrenal glands are responsible for most of the production of our stress hormones, so cortisol and adrenaline. And our so there are different herbs that are called adaptogens. So they help your body adapt to stress
Mhm.
and be more resilient with stress. And there's a lot of different formulas. I'm really picky about which specific supplement brands and companies that I utilize. But there's a lot of different like blends that have different herbs. So depending on what a woman's unique situation is, because some people are like their cortisol, I'll test this in my practice, their cortisol is like super high.
Mhm.
Or it's just dysregulated, like it's high when it's supposed to be low. For example, at night, our cortisol is supposed to be low. A lot of people are what's wired and tired. So they're like, they're physically tired, but their brain's like,
Yeah.
up, and then they can't sleep and they get like a second wind at night. This is definitely a sign of some cortisol issues.
Mhm.
Um, Go ahead.
And how do you test? I was just gonna ask, how do you test cortisol? Do you use the
Yeah,
Dutch test?
I use the Dutch for that. So
Okay.
again, it's through urine because I
Mhm.
find blood testing, like it's a snapshot. It's not really telling me what's happening throughout the day. So it doesn't give me the full picture. And I always would
Mhm.
rather have the full picture.
Yeah.
So it just takes some of the guesswork out of it. So I like to use the Dutch test. It gives me a 4-point cortisol. It's checking urinary metabolites. Some people will check with saliva, but I
Mhm.
like, because I use the Dutch test usually for cycling women. So at the
Mhm.
very last day that they're collecting, they do 4 samples throughout the day. So they're getting their waking sample 2 hours after waking, evening, and then before bed. So we can see like
Mhm.
their circadian rhythm, their
Yeah.
cortisol pattern. And but anyway, so some women have a lot of cortisol around and we need to help their body like chill out more. And some people have really low cortisol, like they're bottomed out, they're just not making very much. And that tells me that they've been chronically stressed. Their body
Mhm.
is very depleted. So
Mhm.
depending on what their unique hormonal picture is, I'll use different herbs to help either sort of dampen the stress response and kind of get things to chill a little more, or some herbs that really help to nourish and kind of help to replete them.
Mhm. What before I do want to get into just like those like kind of maybe
Yeah.
examples of two different ones, but before
Mhm.
I do, in terms of like the signs that you might have, bottomed
Ah,
out or have super high at night, would you recommend, like, for anybody listening to this, like, you don't necessarily have to go ahead and get a Dutch test, like the signs that your body is telling
mhm.
you, just
Yeah.
like you said, like if you're wired and tired at night, like that's
Mhm.
probably a good sign that
Yes.
so just kind
Yes.
of putting that out there. If people are like, oh man, I got to go get a Dutch test to, test this out. You just
Yeah,
listen to the signs. So, um,
exactly.
mhm. But
Yeah.
with that, what are some, just, I'm just curious, like the two kind of buckets in terms of the
Mhm.
herbs that you recommend for those two different like general scenarios.
Yeah. So for people who tend to have a hard time falling asleep, like they're wired at night or they get a second wind at night, I do like to give them some calming support in the evening. And it's not always herbs. Sometimes I will
Mhm.
use herbs, but I will often use nutrients also. So like I'm a big fan of magnesium
Mhm.
at night to help calm people down. I've had a lot of success with that in my practice. There's a specific form, magnesium threonate, which has
Okay.
an affinity to the brain. So it's very calming to the brain. So that's something that I like to use. There are some herbs. There's a supplement called Cortisol Manager. So I think it has magnolia and is it there's maybe an amino acid. I'm forgetting exactly what the other
No, it's
primary
okay.
ingredient is in it, but it's a calming formula to help kind of bring, I mean, it's called Cortisol Manager. It helps to bring cortisol down so that people have an easier time winding down and falling asleep. So that's one. And then there's another product, phosphorylated serine. Again, it's not an herb. Serine is an amino acid. So it's a form of that amino acid that tends to be really calming to people, helps to, again, just lower cortisol and help them to fall asleep and just wind down in the evening. I've seen that work really well as well. So those are just some examples of some things that I'll have people do in the evening. And of course, it's not a replacement for lifestyle. I think when people clean up their evening routine, that makes such a big difference, turning their, shutting down the screens earlier, doing like activities, taking a hot shower, bath, doing some stretching, reading, making a cup of tea. Make sure you're sleeping in a totally dark room, but that you're not having a bunch of, light coming in. I'm a big fan of wearing an eye mask at night. I think that really helps. White
eye
noise.
And, earplugs.
I can't get into the earplug thing. It just feels weird to me to have something in my ear all night.
It's a game changer, but I will tell you that it is something that you actually become dependent on. Like I have worn wax, like the wax earplugs probably for every single night for the past, I don't know, 7 years, maybe. Like once I got into it, because it literally it just shuts everything out. Although you still can hear some things, like I got a puppy, well, she's not a puppy anymore, but last year. And I was like, oh man, I'm not gonna be able to wear earplugs because you need to hear her at night if she, whines, has to go to the bathroom. But I could actually hear her through that, but it blocks out everything else. So it actually worked out. But it is something that if I don't have my earplugs, I don't know how I fall asleep. It's just weird.
That's how I am with white noise. I'm reliant on it. If I don't have white noise, I'm like, something is wrong.
There's actually, do you have a little machine? Because I know there's this little white machine that is actually a white noise machine. Obviously, if you have an app, or they make all those different machines, but I've been
using an app. I turn my phone on airplane mode. That's another important thing for sleep hygiene. Turn your phone either off or unplug the Wi-Fi for sure, which I do. I unplug the Wi-Fi, I turn my phone on airplane, but I'm still able to play the white noise app, thankfully.
Got it.
So I use an app, but I that's been on my mind though. I kind of want to get one of those little machines, and then I don't have to use my phone at all.
Yeah, it's literally just this little, at least though, I mean, I bought this maybe 5 or 8 years ago. I don't even know, but it definitely works. But I do use the earplugs though. And I think, I don't know, I personally they make a huge difference. But I know some people can't get into them because it's just weird having something in your ears.
Totally.
But I actually have I actually put out this sleep checklist thing. It's kind of a different boxes that you go through and you kind of check it off, and then you move to the next one, and then the next one, and then at the very bottom, once you go through all this, it's okay, supplements potentially that might help, and some other stuff. So I'll link that if anybody's listening. I'll link it in the show notes. But it's just a sleep checklist.
I like that.
Yeah, and everything that you mentioned is on it. So we're definitely on the same page.
I love it. Yeah, sleep is the best.
Yeah,
I'm definitely. I need it.
And then the other
side of things.
Yeah, what do you usually recommend in that sense?
Yeah. So the other common, I would say, when it comes to cortisol dysregulation, the other scenario is people who are very tired in the morning. They wake up and they just want to keep snoozing and snoozing and snoozing and snoozing. So that's low cortisol in the morning. If you have a low morning cortisol, or you either wake up with cortisol low, or you don't get what's called the cortisol awakening response. So in the collections, the second one is your 2 hours after waking. And we want to see that, our cortisol should be moderately high when we wake up. That's what wakes us up. And then it should actually have a significant rise after we wake up. And then it starts to go down for the rest of the day to the point where it says it's the lowest point at night when we go to sleep. So a lot of people will either have low waking cortisol, or they're not getting that cortisol awakening response. So they can't really get going. They like need to drink coffee all morning to feel awake.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other common scenario. So then in that situation, I'm always going to really want to work on sleep hygiene to make sure that they're actually getting restful sleep, because a lot of times they're waking up with low morning cortisol because they're exhausted because they've been sleeping, they've had crappy sleep. So that's kind of,
Mm-hmm.
again, when I go to the foundation and I'm trying to get to the root cause, I have to figure out, well, why is that even happening? Is this person rested? And if they're still sleeping, they're sleeping 10 hours and they're still waking up and they're just like, they still can't get up, then that's when we have to really try to do some digging to figure out what is causing this depletion. And if they have a lot of history, this is where the context is really, there's a lot of nuance to this because everyone's situation is going to be different. But, if they've had a lot of chronic stress before, then it makes sense. Like that's an appropriate response. That's an appropriate hormonal response. I think a lot of people love to just be like, there's something wrong with my hormones. I'm broken. And, there's this problem, when it's like, no, your hormones are responding the way they're supposed to. If you've been dealing, your hormones are doing a great job. If you've been chronically stressed, you've been like overworked, or you've been doing a million things and you're just wiped out. It's like, go take a vacation, go do something that's really going to help nourish you. That at that point, when people are that severe, like they're that chronically fatigued and they can't wake up in the morning, like something in their life, usually it's like your job, is the job really wearing you out because you're working crazy long hours? You probably don't even love it, and it's like you're staying up late, you're getting up early, your lifestyle is not really working. It's not aligned with what you want to see in terms of health.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. And I love that you said that, like, because that's the thing too. And it's a lot of people, they're like, oh, this isn't working or something's wrong. And it's a lot of like, hey, my hormones must be messed up, right? Like I got to go fix those. But it's like, no, like you said, your hormones aren't messed up. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing in response to the actions that you're doing. So
exactly.
Yeah. I love that you said that, because it's just so true. And when you think about it that way, it's like, all right, let's stop trying to, I mean, obviously the Dutch test and like those types of tests can be important and can be useful, right? To give you, like you said, a picture, but it's not like, oh, I think my hormones are messed up, I need to go get a Dutch test. No, it's like, okay, let's think and go through these signs that are occurring and like assess the lifestyle and the things that are not shiny, like the sleep and the exercise and the nutrition and stuff like that.
And so if people are waking up and you're just exhausted in the morning and you just want to keep pressing snooze, ask yourself, like, what's wearing you down? What's causing you to be so tired and depleted? Because all the supplements, you can take everything, you can take a million supplements, and it's probably not going to do that much if you're not changing like the way that you're living and what's contributing to that. Now, sometimes it is more complicated. Sometimes there are people who are dealing with some kind of chronic infection. Like there's all kinds of chronic infections that can just wreak havoc in the body and deplete the immune system and just deplete people. So that's something to consider. And sometimes, or mold. Mold is that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But I do see it in my practice from time to time. I think it's a lot more common than people realize. But so it's things like that, toxic exposures, hypothyroidism is definitely a big one. And there's different types of it. The thyroid, that's kind of going back to one of your earlier questions, I think, when you were asking about like, how do I assess for hormonal issues? And I was talking about sex hormones, but thyroid function is a big one. And I do just test blood work for that. And I do check a lot more markers than most people. Most people are used to going and just getting a TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone. That's actually a brain hormone. It's not actually telling me anything about your thyroid hormone levels. So I test 7 markers when it comes to thyroid health, not just one. So that gives me the full picture, so I can really understand someone's thyroid function. So if someone has low thyroid, that's absolutely going to cause fatigue in the morning.
So I'm just curious, what are the 7 that you test?
So I test TSH, and then I test both free and total T3 and T4. So T4, your thyroid hormone makes T4, your thyroid makes T4, which gets converted to T3. So I want to check your total and free levels of both T3 and T4. to get the full picture of your thyroid hormone production. So that's 5 things. And then I test for 2 different kinds of antibodies, anti-TPO, which is anti-thyroid peroxidase antibodies, and then anti-thyroid globulin antibodies. So those are 2 different antibodies, which tell me if the person's having an autoimmune thyroid response. Which then that's a whole nother thing that I support some women with. It's the most common autoimmune condition in women. And it's multifactorial. There's many different things that play into why that develops. So when I'm working with a woman who has thyroid antibodies, we're usually we have to address their stress, we have to address their hormones, we have to address their detoxification and support their body's, pathways of elimination, because there is sort of a toxic component. We have to support gut health. That's huge. We have to support their immune function. So there's all kinds of different things that need to be looked into. And that is the case with pretty much everyone, whether or not they're having thyroid antibodies or not. But definitely when there's an autoimmune picture, that stuff is
and
really,
that would be Hashimoto's?
Yeah. That's called Hashimoto's. And then sometimes I will also check a reverse T3.
Okay. And if you notice, like, if they don't have the antibodies and it's just the lower thyroid hormones, like, what's your first, what do you address first there or recommend first?
Yeah. So thyroid governs metabolism. Thyroid is responsible for the pace at which your biochemical and physiological processes occur. So this is where, again, the history is so important, because when I take you, my initial appointments are up to 2 hours long, because there's so much to talk about for me to really understand someone's history and their full case. And so then I can sort of, usually I can tell, is this because their has a metabolism slowed down because of the way that they've been, eating and exercising, and their body has so much stress that the metabolism has had to adapt, and it's had to decrease, it's had to down regulate all the biological processes that it's running to keep things going. And so I can usually tell if it's more related to that, or if it's actually, it's not related to that, and there's really more a problem with the thyroid itself. So usually that means, they have a issue with converting, because like I said, T4 is inactive, T3 is active. So sometimes there's an issue with that conversion process. Sometimes it's like a cell receptor issue, a signaling issue with their cells. If there's inflammation or a chronic infection, nutrient deficiencies, all those things can affect just how the thyroid is working. The thyroid requires iodine to make thyroid hormone. So if somebody has an iodine deficiency, that's going to affect their thyroid. And there's other mineral and micronutrient deficiencies, sometimes just a protein deficiency, or that goes back to under eating. But so the thyroid really does require energy, and it requires carbohydrates as well.
Yeah. And so kind of talking about that with the carbohydrates, and, I work with a lot of women who are obviously, like I mentioned before, coming from keto, low carb. And do you, like, if you found lower thyroid function and things like that, do you immediately kind of recommend them to increase their carbs, and just, how do you convince them to do that? Because I know, like I said, that's one of my struggles, is just like the convincing that, carbs are not evil. And your body, especially, talking about this podcast, like it's MetFlex and Chill, Metabolic Flexibility, like that kind of whole route there. Is there anything in particular that you do in that sense? Or is it just like you said, just kind of teaching them and helping them understand that more?
Yeah, well, so if the thyroid slows down, what women need to understand is, when your thyroid and your metabolism slow down, everything slows down. That includes your liver detoxification. And everyone's all about, like, oh, I want to detox. It's so trendy to do a detox. And your detox, we all have a built-in detoxification mechanism. Like, we all have that system. And so if you really want to support it, you have to eat, you have to support your metabolism, you have to support your thyroid, because if your thyroid becomes underactive and sluggish, your liver becomes sluggish. And then it just kind of creates this whole vicious cycle, because liver and thyroid actually are very connected. And I believe the The conversion process happens in the liver. Actually, the conversion of T4 to T3 happens in the liver. So there is a lot of connection between liver and thyroid. And so I always explain, you have to keep the energy coming in so your body can detoxify. This is where I think people, this is a really common mistake that people make, is they think they need to go on like a juice cleanse or do some kind of fast or do, like something that involves a lot of restriction, like significant restriction to detox, but you're actually making yourself more toxic. Because everything, if your body doesn't have energy, it can't keep those processes going.
Yeah, for sure. No, that makes total sense. And it's like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
And then something you mentioned too about like, I've talked a lot about metabolic adaptation on this podcast in the past. And like, it kind of goes back to the hormone thing that you mentioned. Like like people are like, oh my gosh, my metabolism's broken. And it's like, no, it's not broken. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Exactly. It's doing a great job at being efficient with energy and preparing your body for a famine.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, that's definitely a misconception out there. Like I have a broken metabolism or my hormones are broken, but they're literally not. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing to
the body's
accommodate
so intelligent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Well, this has been awesome. I do want to ask just a kind of last question in terms of your personal nutrition and exercise routines. Can you just tell us like what a day looks like in terms of like your eating routine and your exercise?
Sure. Yeah. Like what specifically do you want to know about that?
Just like,
I don't know, like what, question.
So like for your training, so I know obviously you're, crushing it in the gym. So what's your training split look like nowadays?
Yeah. So I pretty much just go to the gym and train 3 times per week. Okay. I've learned, with my history, and I'm so protective of my hormones because like I've shared in the beginning, I went without a period for a significant time in my young woman years. And so for me now, I'm like, that to me is precious and I do not ever want to mess it up. So I'm very mindful of how much I exercise and how hard I'm pushing myself. I really enjoy it. And that's part of the reason that's something that's gotten me into trouble in my past years. So I'm very careful now. That's like, I do like to push myself, but then I have to rest. If I want to work out and I want to strength train and push hard in the gym, I have to balance that out. So I take my rest and my recovery very, very seriously. So 3 days I've found I want to train pretty hard in the gym and lift heavy 3 days per week is pretty good. Every once in a while I'll do like a 4th day if I'm feeling like I'm recovered. But if I don't feel like, if I'm still feeling a little tired, or if my sleep hasn't, if I had to have a bad night of sleep or something like that, like I just don't worry about it. So I strength train pretty much 3 days per week. I do try to walk most days. So I do, I'm mindful of just making sure I'm doing just basic movement throughout the day. And I love hiking. I'm in the Pacific Northwest and it's summer right now. So it's just beautiful. And this is like the few months out of the year where it's sunny and warm and we get to go outside and enjoy the playground that we have here. So I do try to get out and hike a lot in the summertime too. So that's awesome. pretty typical for me. I'm really into like mobility and just being able to move well. And so I'm very mindful about that too. I have a yoga background that before I got into strength training, I was big into yoga, which I'm not really into so much now. I do like to do like breathing and meditating and that kind of thing. But I feel like I get so much good movement from lifting weights and everything else that I do. But I'm very big on like doing proper warm up and stretching and doing mobility stuff, like, before I train to prepare my body and prevent injury. And then just like sometimes like at night, I like to lay on my foam roller and do some stretching and stuff. So I do incorporate that almost every day, probably as well. And then for eating, I like big meals. A lot of people, I think, have heard this, it's better to eat like lots of small meals throughout the day. And I really think everyone needs to figure out what works for them. Some people really like to have more times, like more frequent eating throughout the day. I'm like, I have stuff I want to do. It's like, you have to have so much time. I'm like, I don't want to be bothered. So I like to just like eat a big meal that's really satisfying. And then you know, and then I feel like energetic and I can do a lot and I don't really have to think about food again for a little while. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really like a 3 meals a day kind of gal.
Awesome. And
I
what's
eat
like your favorite meal,
a
like
steak,
food wise?
ribeye steak,
Oh,
no
nice.
question. I love ribeye. I love it. That's definitely my favorite, like post
Mhm.
lifting food, like
Yeah.
after deadlifts or squats. I love to eat a ribeye
Do you
steak.
have
Yeah.
like a favorite like carb source or fat source?
Yeah.
Obviously
Oh,
ribeye is protein
totally.
and fat, but
Yeah, I'm a big animal protein. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I was vegetarian for I didn't say how long, but I was vegetarian for 10 years. So
oh
14
wow.
to 24. And that was when I had just started lifting weights and I started really actually craving meat. Like I was starting to, like, my body wanted to build muscle and I was just like, I can't stay away from it anymore. So
Yeah.
um yeah, and that's a whole nother story, but I won't go into it right now. So now I'm like, I love meat. I eat it every day. I'm a big fan of red meat because it's
Mm-hmm.
so dense in micronutrients. You know, white meat, chicken, turkey, I mean, it's fine, you're getting protein, it's better than no
Mm-hmm.
protein, but it's really not, doesn't have all the micronutrients that red meat has. So I think of red
Yeah.
meat as like, this is like, I eat this because I don't want to take a million supplements to replace all the
Yeah.
B vitamins and the zinc and, you know, all the good things that we're getting from it. So I eat a lot of red meat. And my favorite carb source, I do a lot of sweet potatoes. I love sweet potatoes and just regular potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of potatoes and sweet potatoes. I like white rice. I love fruit. Summer right now, so I'm like really into
Yeah.
watermelon lately. It's so
Oh
refreshing.
my God. I just literally I could eat a whole watermelon a day. I'm just laughing because I have like a whole bag of watermelon in my refrigerator like at all times over these last few
Yeah,
months.
no, I've had a watermelon in my fridge like constantly the last few weeks too, because it's just been
It's
so
so
hot
good.
here lately. A few weeks ago we had this huge heat wave where it was like over
Mm-hmm.
100 degrees, which is that
Yeah, I
never
remember
happens
that.
up here. It's
Yeah.
so rare. I mean, I don't think that's ever even happened before. I think it was a record. But anyways,
Yeah.
but yeah, when it's hot, it's like, oh, it's the most refreshing thing. I love
Yeah.
citrus too. Like I love grapefruit.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, big on fruit. And then my favorite fat source. Oh, that's so hard. There's so many good fats. Oh man. I mean, I love butter. I mean,
That's a good one.
but I don't just like I cook with it or
Yeah.
you know, it's really good to make, I think seafood and butter is really good.
Mhm.
Like a few weeks
Mhm.
ago, I went out to dinner and got the crab and it came with like a butter, like melted butter basically. And I was just
Yeah.
like dipping this amazing, juicy, fresh crab meat into butter. And I was
Yeah.
like, this is the best thing ever. Or
Yeah,
like
that is
artichoke. Have you
definitely.
ever had steamed artichoke with butter
Mhm. Yes,
and
I
lots of
have.
salt? Oh
So
my God,
good.
it's so good. So butter's great.
Yeah.
And chocolate. That would be my favorite fat.
Love it. Love it. I love also that you said kind of just going back to the meat sources. So like, the chicken, the white meat, turkey stuff
Yeah.
versus the red meat. That's something that I pay attention to because I actually really enjoy like chicken breasts. Like I just like eating
Yeah.
it. It fills me up.
Yeah.
But when I'm like kind of planning out my day, I always make sure that I have like a red meat source, whether that's going to be in like lunch or dinner or sometimes breakfast. Breakfast, I usually do, well, my breakfast every day is like usually Greek yogurt with Kabocha squash. That was something I was asking. Have you ever had
Oh,
Kabocha squash before?
I don't actually think I've ever had it before.
It's Ashley makes fun of me. If anybody listening, Ashley and Elly are great friends too. Ashley makes fun of me all the time because we always like I always tell her that I'm eating Kabocha squash because I literally eat it every day. It's so good. It's
That's
like a
so
mix
funny.
between sweet potatoes and pumpkin,
Ooh.
like kind
Okay,
of had a baby, but it's so good.
I'll have to try it. I'll definitely
Yeah.
have to try it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's super. It's actually the Japanese pumpkin. That's what it's called. So in Japan,
Okay.
it's very popular, but it's super like it's very very orange, like even more orange than a sweet potato. So it's like super nutrient dense. And the skin too, like you can eat the skin because once you bake it, it just becomes So
that's like what I do with sweet potatoes too. I just eat the skin.
Yeah,
but I love the Japanese yams, so I wonder if it's kind of
the
similar
purple
to that.
ones.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or there's purple and white, I believe.
Yeah,
but yeah,
they're purple on the outside and like yellow white on the inside. The ones that I usually get.
Yeah, it's like super sweet. I actually wrote a whole blog on Kabocha squash because I
That's
am
so
obsessed
funny.
with it. But there's like, it's kind of like an, like when you have to kind of pick the right one, because if you get a bad one, it's not as good as what I'm saying that it is. So
Mhm.
I've had some people be like, this sucks. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you probably didn't get a good one.
Okay, well, I will
Um,
definitely try it now because of you.
Yeah, I'll send you the blog so you can see like when you buy it what to
Yes.
look for. You know,
Okay.
like when you're buying like a watermelon, for
Yes.
example. You're
I
just talking
like
about
tap it.
yeah, and there's supposed to be like a
Yes.
little bit of a white like kind of blemish that or whatever. It's like that tells you if it's sweet or juicy or
Yeah.
whatever. So yeah, there's different tricks
Totally.
behind that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, I'm all about that. I'm always
Yeah.
like the watermelons, like hitting all of them. Cause you know, you're supposed to see if
Yeah,
it sounds
yeah.
like it's supposed to sound kind of like a drum, like
Yeah,
have
and
kind
that's
of a
like if
nice,
it's
if it's like, there's like a different sound that they have.
mhm.
So I'm always hitting all.
Yeah, that's so funny. I feel like we'd be like really great going grocery shopping together.
I know.
I'm like, I'll probably like shake the Kabocha squash and you're like tapping the watermelon. Oh my
This
God,
is
that's
why
funny.
I
And then
can
Ashley's like in the organ meat section. She's like, where are the organ meats?
I feel like we're the
Anyway.
brains.
Oh
I was
man.
gonna say this is why I could never have someone else use like an outsourcing grocery shopping thing. Cause I'm like, I have to feel and
Yeah.
like pick the produce. Otherwise it's like I
Oh
don't
yeah.
want like bad produce.
Yeah, I'm the same way for sure. Awesome. I feel like I could talk to you forever.
I know. Well, we'll have to do it again.
Yeah, we should. We should definitely have a part 2 and chat about some other things. I'm sure we'll have some questions that come out of this
Mhm.
podcast as women listen to it. So yeah, let's wrap up. Do you want to is there anything that you have coming up that you want to share about? Anything fun or exciting, like within your own practice or life or anything at all?
Well, I haven't announced anything yet, but I don't know when this is going to be released, and maybe I'll have announced it by then, but I do have a group program that I'm going to be announcing soon.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yeah. And so up until this point, I've just been working with women one-on-one, and I've just been feeling much more drawn to doing some more group things where it's just much more educational. So it's going to be really teaching women how to tune in and build a deeper connection with their own body, which I kind of touched on earlier. But it's really just to help women feel like, instead of beating ourselves up and feeling like we're broken, like there's something wrong, or like our hormones are messed up. It's like really about how to actually, like you said too, to look at the signs that your body is giving you, because a lot of us don't really know like what to look for, or what do these symptoms that my body is doing, what does it even mean. And like I said, the body is so wise and it's so intelligent. And when we look at symptoms as our body's way of talking to us, it's communicating to us. It's just about learning how to listen and how to, interpret what that could mean. So it's really going to be that'll be the theme.
I love it.
So yeah, but
Cool.
I won't say anything yet because I don't know if the timing is going to be.
Yeah, no, I will definitely, probably, I mean, who knows? I don't know when you're releasing it, but either way, we'll put like your website and wherever we can, wherever people can find it, we'll add that to the show notes. Do you want to tell everybody where they can find you on your website and social media and stuff?
Sure. So on Instagram, I'm most active over there. It's at Dr. Elly Michelle, and it's spelled ELLY. And my website is drellymichelle.com.
Awesome. Sweet. Well, I will link all of those in the show notes for everybody to find. And this was great. Like I said, we should do it again for sure.
I'd love to.
And I'd love to go grocery shopping with you sometime.
Oh yeah,
I think
totally. Did you know you're in San Diego, right?
I am, and you you went to Bastyr.
I went to Bastyr in San Diego. Yeah. Before I moved back up to Seattle, where I'm from. But anyways, I lived there for like almost 6 years, because I stayed after I graduated. I stayed there for a while. So
that's awesome.
So I
well,
totally
if you're ever here, definitely let me know. I've been here for about 3 or 4 years now. I was in Miami and then New York before that.
Okay.
So this is my first West Coast experience, but yeah, I've been here for 4 years, so I like it a little bit.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Awesome. All right. Well, it was great talking to you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of MetFlex and Chill. I hope you enjoyed it. It would be awesome if you could give the show 5 stars and leave a review on iTunes. We're trying to get placed in the top 100 health podcasts, and the 5-star ratings and reviews are what can help make that happen. I'll add step-by-step directions for leaving a review in the show notes. I know it's a big ask, but it really helps. Thanks again. See you next time.